Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to do an even basting stitch by hand, and I'll explain why it's so useful. An even basting stitch is a temporary stitch we use to hold fabric pieces together before we sew them permanently. The key is to make your stitches the same length and evenly spaced, usually a quarter or a half an inch. We use basting stitches to hold seams in place while you work. Check the fit of a garment before final sewing. Mark lines or folds temporarily. Stabilize tricky fabrics like slippery or stretchy materials. When you baste, don't pull too tight. It may be easier to remove later. Here are a few tips and tricks when doing a basting stitch. When doing a basting stitch, I recommend not pulling too tight on the thread. It should be easy to remove later on because remember, this is just a basting stitch. It's a temporary stitch and we're going to remove it. So we don't want it to be too tight. Keeping your stitches even makes everything neater and it helps your final sewing turn out perfectly. Alright, let's get started and I'll show you step by step how to make these stitches. So now we're going to move on to doing an even basting stitch. So for this, whatever inch you decide to make your stitch, that is the distance in between your stitches. So I will be using a half an inch. So you can use a ruler for this. I definitely recommend a ruler, but I only had measuring tape and then my measuring tape was ripped. So here we go. I'm going to use that and I'm going to be doing in half an inch. So if my stitch is a half an inch, the space in between my stitches should be a half an inch because this is an even basting stitch. I recommend using a pen or a pencil just if you're starting off, It definitely helps to keep the even basting stitch accurate. So again, I'm going to do the half an inch, so I'll mark a half an inch for my stitch line here. Then the space in between should be a half an inch, and then I'll make a half an inch stitch line here with my pen, and then I'll skip over a half an inch and do another half an inch stitch line here. Then I'll skip over a half an inch. So the space I'm leaving here is a half an inch, and then I'll start my next stitch line, which is going to be a half an inch. And I continue this method all the way down. So the next space in between this stitch is a half an inch, and then I'll draw a stitch line for half an inch. Then I'll try to fit another one in here, but looks like I'm going to run off. So I'll do a space of a half an inch and then I'll make a half an inch stitch line. And that will be, let's see if I can fit, I won't be able to fit that there. So yeah, this is an even basting stitch. There is a half an inch for the stitch line, and in between the stitch lines there is a half an inch. Now you can do a quarter of an inch. If you decide to do a quarter, that means the space in between will be a quarter for you. But I suggest just doing the half an inch if you're just starting off. It's a great way to practice and get your feet wet. Then you can play around and do different even basting stitches. So I'm going to use a double threaded needle. So I have 2 strands of thread, and I'm going to tie it at the end. If you need help on how to do this, I do have a video teaching you how to do a double stranded piece of thread with a needle. This just strengthens the thread and it makes it a little easier when doing hand stitching. And I do like to put a loop at the top. That just prevents it from slipping through the fabric when sewing. I kind of make a sloppy loop knot, but that's just me. I like it to be really thick, and then if I need to trim it down, I can trim it down at the end. And if there's any excess, I also clip that off. You can clip it off now, or you can clip it off at the end, whatever works for you. Then we're going to take our needle and we're going to start from the back to hide the knot. Some people start from the top, but I really like to start from the back. It just makes the even basting stitch look a lot neater. So we'll start at the top of that first stitch that we made. We're going to start from the back and pull the needle to the front. You're going to pull it all the way through, and that knot that we made should stop your thread from coming through. Then you're going to take your needle and put it at the bottom of that stitch line that you made, and you're going to pull the needle through the back and then into the front of the next stitch line. And you're going to keep that method going all the way down until you get to the end. So you're going to go in, I'll do it a little slower this time, and you're going to pull it all the way through the back. And try to line up your thread with your stitch line perfectly. If it doesn't, that's fine. So you're going to come through the back of the top of your stitch line. And you're going to pull your needle all the way through. And then you're going to go with your needle to the bottom of that stitch line. And you're going to pull the needle all the way through. And you're going to come up through the top of the next stitch line, the 4th stitch line here. And you're going to pull your needle all the way through. And then you're going to go to the bottom of that stitch line and put your needle through the bottom of that point of that stitch line and pull the needle through, all the way through. And then on your next stitch line, you're going to come at the top of the stitch line from the back, and you're going to pull the needle all the way through the front. You're going to take the needle and put it at the bottom point of that stitch line and push the needle all the way through again. And pull it all the way through. Just like that. And then since you're in the back with your needle and thread, you're going to go at the top of the next stitch line, but through the back again. At the top of that stitch line. Oop! Slipped out of my hand there. 1 second, guys. So through the back at the top of the stitch line, from the back, and you're going to pull that all the way through the front, and then use the needle to push that thread right to the back again at the bottom of that stitch line. So I do have a little point here at the bottom, and I'm going to try to get that, but you usually don't have to if it goes out of your embroidery machine. But yeah, this is how the even basting stitch should look when you're finished. Notice that the stitch line and the space in between the stitches are exactly the same, and it's very neat. You can always take this off the embroidery unit and you can press it to make those creases go away, but if you flip it over, you'll see that it's even on the back as well because we kept the same method. That's how you'll know that you've done the even basting stitch correctly. Having those stitches even and the space in between them even makes this an even basting stitch. This front and the back should both be even. There you have it, the even basting stitch. Comment below and let me know if you tried to do the even basting stitch, if you have any questions, or if you have any ideas of any stitches you'd like to see me do. I would love to do them. This is really fun for me. Thank you guys for supporting. Please like and subscribe. Have a wonderful week.